Good afternoon. Welcome to another monthly briefing from the Geneva Internet platform. Last month we sort of noticed the speed up in developments. This is a typical annual cycle, and then March sort of builds up on that. There was a bunch of interesting events, a number of interesting developments, and it was not easy to separate some of the trends. But in the next hour, we'll try to run through the main events, main developments, and then what's coming in the next month. With me today, of course, behind the scenes, number of our friends and colleagues from Diplo, they are helping us push through with the webinar, but also Marilia Maciel, who will help us with some of the trends that we'll cover today, and Marco is the online moderator in Geneva. He's going to encourage you to share your thoughts and post the questions through the text form. And of course, if you have any updates and thoughts on your own, feel free to share. Let's start with looking back into the main events in March. There was quite a number of events. This is a snapshot of some of those. Not all of them are there. Couple of interesting quick reflections. One is on the principles for the AI, where basically UNESCO was or suggested that the developments of the AI, artificial intelligence, should also follow the principles of Rome, as UNESCO put it, rights, openness, accessibility, and multi-stakeholder governance. When it comes to ICON 64, the continuation on discussions on the new GTLDs, whether some will come soon, when, what is the process, and then a bit more of the, let's say, not so technical discussions anymore on the IDN, internationalized domain names, and particularly in the sense of new constituencies, involvement of new constituencies, and how this reflects to the universal acceptance. We have Nigel from ICON with us, so Nigel, feel free to type any sort of the additional updates from ICON. We can get back to that later on. When it comes to the OSCE Going Digital Summit, you can find the full reporting from the summit at the Digital Watch website, so I'm not going to dive into that. Quite some interesting discussions, but I invite you to visit the reporting. And lastly, there was the start of the group of governmental experts on little autonomous weapons systems in Geneva, and a particular interesting update is that the interest or the push or the energy of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres directly was motivating, encouraging the group to sort of speed up the work on restricting the development of little autonomous weapon systems. That was, as I said, a snapshot, but you can find much more on the Digital Watch website, and Marco just shared the link to the reports from the OECD Going Digital Summit. Moving to the main developments. As we said, and you can find it on Digital Watch, there's a bunch of even daily developments in all the different baskets and themes that we cover. But let's just run through some of the interesting ones, and then we'll focus on three particular trends of the last months separately after this. An interesting update is the UN Office for South-South Cooperation, which launched a digital tool for support of the South-South digital cooperation. And that's basically sort of a global knowledge sharing and partnership platform that helps developing countries to connect, learn, and collaborate with the potential partners digitally. Then we have within the topic of the sustainable development, we had the Commonwealth Digital Connectivity Agenda, which will be collared by the UK and South Africa, and which is mainly focused on the support to digital trade. Security will cover separately in a couple of minutes, because it was, again, unfortunately, probably the high trend. When it comes to e-commerce and the internet economy, we'll go more into details of that as well. There's quite some updates related to internet economy again. But maybe a quick snapshot here is a focus on the cryptocurrencies and generally digital assets And we see again Facebook sort of reminding us of their continuous efforts towards creating own cryptocurrency. We're waiting for that. And then we saw that German Ministry of Finance urged the introduction of regulatory framework for blockchain-based securities, basically regulating and recognizing legally the various digital assets like tokens and so on. When it comes to digital rights, a couple of interesting developments. Again, more on that is on the Digital Watch platform, but an interesting one is the UN Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Opinion, which called on the EU to bring the Copyright Directive in line with the freedom of expression standards. And some of you might have been following the discussions and debates, dilemmas about the Copyright Directive. And it's interesting, it's important to mention that there is a vote in the EU Parliament on the Copyright Directive today, if I'm not wrong. Moving forward to the jurisdiction issues, we touched upon the Huawei case last month, and now we have sort of a continuation of that saga. Now Huawei strikes back, and it sued the US government over equipment ban. Basically, Huawei is claiming that the US doesn't have any, or hasn't provided any evidences for the statements that their products are insecure. And linked to that is that NATO is also holding internal consultations on the security of third-party systems, particularly Huawei, in its countries, which might be understood also as sort of a continued pressure by the US towards its allies to consider banning Huawei in other countries. We'll discuss some of the intermediary responsibilities later in greater details. When it comes to infrastructure, Russia is laying a new fiber optics cable along the Arctic coast. Some have linked that to the possible specific or separate Russian internet. Now it might be also simply a connectivity issue within Russia. And when it comes to net neutrality, that's quite interesting. We don't have many updates. It seems like net neutrality debates are now sort of dispersed through other topics discussed within the context of human rights, context of economic aspects, and context of access, basically, and infrastructure. But then there were a couple of developments when it comes to new technologies, and in particular the artificial intelligence. There was an interesting statement by the former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who said that it might be much harder to control the AI weapons, the autonomous lethal weapons, and basically the artificial intelligence in the weapons than the nuclear ones. And he justified that the AI may achieve unintended consequences, that its goal is to remain hidden in a way, so there will be less of transparency than what we had in the nuclear weapons, and then that AI might change the human values. So not just sort of produce a direct impact, but change the human values and processes, which is a much more in-depth impact that probably unwanted that it could create. And lastly, if you remember the case of the Uber self-driving car, which was tested in Arizona last year, and it killed a pedestrian. So there was a legal process on that in Arizona. Well, the country's alternative office ruled that there is no basis for criminal liability for Uber, but it basically encouraged, recommended that the police department continues with investigation and look into driving conditions and testimonies of involved actors. That's in a nutshell what our Internet Governance Barometer of March shows. And now we'll focus on the three particular trends when it comes to March. It seems like the trend in the trends is that we have security high on the agenda. It is something that we envisaged again in the crystal ball exercise at the beginning of the year. And I say unfortunately, because in most cases we see the reports of the incidents and the problems rather than responses. This case, this time in March, we sort of focused on the three particular sub-developments or trends. We start with the bad news in a way, but then we'll move it towards some more good news. There is a continued mutual accusation of cyber attacks. It was quite a challenge to put up this phrase correctly, because it is the accusations and the reports of the attacks. But as we know, evidences are very few, and there is it's extremely hard to do any sort of attribution. So we simply had to say it is a lot of accusations and alleged attacks. We start with Venezuela, which blamed the U.S. For a power outage. Basically, the U.S. the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro accused U.S. for cyber attacks against its central hydro plant Guri, and then the huge power cut that they had in Venezuela. And he even added sort of details that the attacks originated from Chicago and Houston. Yet again, there were some reports from the media coverage that it is possible that the power plants were in such a bad condition that it was not a cyber attack, but might be a negligence. Again, not much evidences of that, but it's important to mention this sort of trends of accusations. And then the Washington Post reported that the U.S. Cyber Command, back in the midterms of the U.S. elections last year, successfully blocked the Russian agency, so-called Internet Research Agency, famous for meddling allegedly again into the U.S. elections, which is a sort of a first signal that the U.S. have conducted or used the offensive cyber capabilities to neutralize a foreign agency, a foreign actor. Washington Post calls on the anonymous sources from the U.S. government, senior level ones. It might be a signal that the U.S. is sort of opening up and showing that it is going to actually use offensive cyber capabilities, or what they refer to as active cyber defense, or in that sense using the capabilities for defense, but in the offensive way. And this might lead us to the trend of justification, public justification of using offensive cyber capabilities in future. We have seen some related cases when UK and Australia basically attacked ISIS and so on. So we see more and more use of the offensive cyber capabilities by states formally. And then there were a couple of accusations or warnings by the media and by the tech community. So FireEye, in a way, alerted that the Russian hackers are targeting European governments ahead of the May European elections. We have heard some warnings also coming from the European governments related to that, and we'll see later on that Europe is actually increasing its own policy framework and mechanisms to defend itself. There was a claim by the Indonesian officials, the head of the Indonesian General Election Commission, that again Russia and China might be meddling with the Indonesian elections, and there was a response from Russia and China that sort of denouncing that and even offering assistance to Indonesia to prevent such cases. And then there were two interesting cases which are related to incidents. One is the ransomware which struck the Norsk Hydro, a huge Norwegian company which is one of the biggest aluminium producers, and it basically forced the aluminium producer to get back to the analog management of some parts of the equipment. There are no speculations that the state might be behind the attack. It might be a corporate warfare, but it was an interesting case to mention. The second sub-trend of that, which is more on the positive side, is the European set of European EU or EU level steps to enhance their policy responses and mechanisms to defend themselves and protect from cyber attacks. The major one is certainly the EU Parliament, which adopted the EU Cybersecurity Act, And there was a lot of discussions on Cybersecurity Act, which basically developed or introduced the certification scheme for products, processes, and services which are sold in the EU countries. An interesting bit is that the whole Cybersecurity Act was sort of well discussed by the other communities, by private sector, expert communities, and there was not much of the debates about whether it's good or bad, and it might be complicated to implement, but in most cases it was sort of welcomed. At the same time, the members of the European Parliament raised concerns about security risks related to third-party equipment, vendors that are present in the EU, namely and particularly focusing on the Chinese IT market. The European Council approved the rules for screening foreign direct investments to protect critical infrastructure. So in a way, the EU Council provided or offered support to member states in screening the foreign direct investments which are related to critical infrastructure, again in relation to security, which might increase critical infrastructure security in Europe. The EU adopted the Law Enforcement Emergency Response Protocol, which should ease the investigation of cyber incidents on the European level, and basically it has set the European or Europol's European Cybercrime Center as the key player in this field. And lastly, the ENISA, the main network security agency of Europe, has released a paper which sort of provides recommendations for providing cybersecurity of electoral processes, again towards the elections in May, but also the various national elections across EU. And then the third one, sub-trend, is the new child safety initiatives launched. Probably unfairly, we neglect, in all these geopolitical tensions, we neglect some good efforts when it comes to combating child abuse and increasing child safety online. And there were a number of interesting steps in the previous months as well, but we decided to focus on some here. One was the African Union, who made an urgent call to protect children online. So that was basically during the meeting of the African Union on combating online child sexual exploitation in Addis Ababa in March, which was attended by child protection law enforcement officials from 55 EU states. And then also in Ireland, there's a new child safety law which basically puts a bit of more liability on the social media providers and intermediaries when it comes to the parental control, cyberbullying, posting videos which promote harm and so on, and even to some extent allow or introduce a possibility of pressing criminal charges against intermediaries in these cases. And there's a nice update from Serbia, which launched the first children's guide to online safety. I'm sure there are a lot of other countries which are developing more on that, so it's worth mentioning, definitely. This is, in a nutshell, the cybersecurity trend of the month. And then we are moving to the second trend, internet platforms under the radar. And I pass the floor to Marilia, who will lead you more through that part. Marilia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vlad, and good afternoon to everyone. Actually, the tech platforms, they continue to be under the radar. They have been under the radar for some time now, and there have been some interesting new developments in the month of March concerning Facebook. Facebook is being investigated by New York prosecutors due to the fact that they have broke some data deals with large tech companies such as Amazon, Apple, and Sony. And these data deals would give access to these third companies to data that belong to the users of Facebook and to their friends. So they had access to users' information, such as their contact details, telephone details, and access to friends' information as well. This prosecution is running in New York, but let's not forget that there's another case still running in parallel, which is Cambridge Analytica. And Facebook has really been under the radar of privacy laws and activists in the US. Privacy activists say that this conduct of Facebook recently has broken privacy regulations in the US, so we will follow the development of this case, but it has been a very tough year for Facebook. The other development concerning tech platforms is concerning the shootings that happened in a mosque in New Zealand. The shooters, they recorded videos of their actions concerning the weapons that they used and the shootings, and they put these videos online. And these videos have been widely circulated in Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and regardless of the efforts that these companies have made to take down the videos, Facebook, for instance, took down more than 1 million videos that were uploaded on its platform. The videos continue to be uploaded, so they are still available on the platforms. And of course, this raises concerns with regards not only to the how this kind of speech is being propagated online, but also with regards to the liability of intermediaries. Should regulators be tougher when it comes to liability and laws that really enforce it? And the platforms have been showing that they are not really able to respond when there are massive and viral content that is spread like that. So we will keep following this development as well. When it comes to the third trend, and now moving on to economic issues, we have seen that Google has also had a tough year. It has been condemned by the European Commission for the third time in a row in the last 3 years in another case concerning competition. What happened was that Google Ad Search was being embedded in third-party websites, and Google had contracts with these third-party websites. And some clauses of these contracts were considered abusive by the European Commission because they required the third-party websites not to show any ads or information concerning rivals of Google search. So Amazon and other, Microsoft and other kind of search engines, they could not show information on the third-party websites. The Commission has fined Google with another heavy fine of 1.5 billion euros. But let's see how this will develop, because Google has been fined before and it has not really changed or adjusted its practices. The European Commission said that this practice with the Google ads have been going on for more than 10 years, which also puts into question if the authorities are really able to prosecute these cases in due time, because the harm has been happening to Google competitors for more than 10 years now. So considerable damage has been done when it comes to competition. Another development this time concerning Uber is with regards to fines or money that Uber agreed to pay in settlements with authorities in two countries, in the Netherlands and in the US. In the case of the Netherlands, that has been a prosecution that authorities have been issued some years ago concerning the offer of services of Uber in the country without taking into account regulation concerning transportation services. So taxi drivers in the Netherlands, they need to abide by these regulations concerning private transportation services, but Uber did not. And in the end of the day, Uber decided to call for an agreement, not be taken to court. So it's going to pay the money, the fines that are due in the Netherlands. And the same case happened as well in the US. In the case of the US, there has been a class action. Drivers of Uber, they have filed a class action and saying that they were actually employees of Uber, so they were entitled to some rights and they did not receive due rights. The class action has been going on for some time, and Uber has decided to pay. And this has been a very heavy amount of money. It was more than $20 million in this case. It sounds like a lot, but each driver of Uber will receive an average of 0.37 cents of dollar for each mile they drove. So considering the number of Uber drivers, it's not a lot, but the company will adjust its policies as well to give more support to drivers. So before they disconnect Uber drivers from the platform, they need to provide some assistance to make sure that the drivers improve or they abide by the standards of the platform and not only disconnect them. And they will provide courses and training. So there are a lot of things that the company will try to offer to try to provide better conditions of work for Uber drivers in the US. And the last development is related to France and tax law. As we know, tax is another big issue for authorities worldwide, especially in Europe. Authorities have been discussing for some time on how to tax the revenues of tech companies. They couldn't reach an agreement on the European level. They tried, but there was not a common view on the issue. So France decided to move forward unilaterally. So the government revealed plans to tax companies. They will be taxed in a way that the aim of the regulation will be larger companies, so an average of 30 companies that have more than 270 million global revenue. So they're really targeting not startups, but big companies. There are companies from the US, of course, but also from Europe and China that would fall under the regulation. And 3% of the revenue that these companies receive in France, they would go to the authorities as a tax revenue. So what is interesting is that France probably will be the first country to enact such a law. There has been discussions in different countries, but since President Macron now has a majority in Congress, it's very likely that the law will pass Congress soon, and we will see how it will be applied in practice. It will be interesting to watch as well, because it may provide an example to other European countries on how to tax tech companies. And France promised to take this discussion now to the level of the OECD and try to ensure that a common model of taxing tech companies will be found in the OECD as well, to try to align different approaches of countries that are members of this international organization. So these are the main developments on the internet economy sector. Over to you, Vlada.
Thanks, Marilia, and special thanks to little Stuart, who is in behind. You could hear him adding some comments to Marilia's developments. Unfortunately, we couldn't understand, but it's important that we have Generation AI with us on these webinars, because this is what we are discussing. So greetings to little Stuart. Okay, moving on to looking ahead to what's coming in April. Again, bunch of interesting events in April. There'll be probably more added to the list. Just get back to Digital Watch for /events for details and the full list of events. Some of the interesting ones, the UNCTAD e-commerce week, Internet Freedom Festival, which has become a tradition. Intergovernmental group of experts on e-commerce and the digital economy, the third session in Geneva, for those of you based in Geneva. The second Western Balkans Digital Summit, WSIS, or World Economic Forum first, and then the WSIS Forum in Geneva, Internet of Things Day, and the ILO Law for Social Justice. We will definitely cover, if not earlier than during the next briefing, main developments of these events, but we might also end up with following with just-in-time reporting from some of those events, particularly possibly the UNCTAD e-commerce week and the WSIS forum, as well as the second Western Balkans Digital Summit. We'll confirm that in the next days. You'll see that on Digital Watch. If you end up having some more events that we should know about, let us know, either here or later, and we'll be glad to add to the list of events. When it comes to the work of the Geneva Internet Platform and Diplo in the next month, the monthly newsletter is coming in the next days. We'll cover the February and March issues. And then we will be present at the WSIS Forum for a session on cybersecurity and AI. And so if you happen to be around in Geneva for the WSIS Forum, join us in the session or simply visit us at our booth. It will be good to see some of you, or put the names to the faces again. I will stop there. This is sort of the overview of the month, and I think we can, before moving into local hubs, I think we can switch back to Marco to see if there were any comments, questions from the online or chat space. Marco.
Hello, Vlada. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
We do have some questions from our online audience. Delphi is asking us about the Ss7 exploit, I think. If you can elaborate a bit more on that from the question side and maybe also for the answer side. We have D2 asking 1 billion euros, is it really a big heavy fine for Google? I think this is just a witty comment. And then Christian Roy asking, do we know if Google actually paid the past fines? These are all the questions that we have so far.
Thank you, Marco. Well, briefly on the Ss7, this is basically an exploit in the telecommunications protocol, which allows SMS communications and the mobile telephone network. It is an old exploit, but it seems like it's being more and more exploited by hackers, particularly in the 3G and 4G networks, to follow on the content of the SMSs or the location of the users. And it has been used recently also in some of the bank frauds, where the bank sent you the code over the SMS, that it could be snooped and sniffed, and the hackers could exploit it and possibly steal some money. There were some comments by the researchers that there is an increase in misusing this exploit, and it's quite hard to patch the exploit on the level of the whole set of telecom networks around the world and the basic protocols. The comforting update might be that 5G network, which is coming, is going to address it, at least allegedly or officially. Yet there were some researchers that promised to present soon the findings that even 5G, at least in these test phases, have some vulnerabilities which could be exploited. We'll definitely have to follow on that. We can hope that the 5G, as promised, will increase security of communications in the telecom networks as well, even though this is more of a telecom issue than the internet in the narrow sense. And for the comments related to Google fines, I would probably switch back to Marilia or Stuart. Marilia, go ahead.
So actually, the value is a very good question. There are some people that are assessing that all these fines that are being given to tech companies is more something that makes regulators look good because they are on the media, they are applying heavy fines. When it comes to antitrust, that's a heavy fine. As far as antitrust cases go, it's a heavy fine. If it's a heavy fine for Google or not, that is highly debatable concerning the revenue that Google makes worldwide. So I think it's a fair question, but let's remember that they have been fined for even more before. So it's fine after fine. Of course, they are appealing, and this is related to Christine's question. I am not sure about the 2016 fine, if they paid or not. The 2017, they certainly appealed, and I think that the case is still being reviewed. Let's see how they are going to behave with this fine, but I believe they will appeal again. But there are people that are arguing exactly this. I mean, the fines make authorities look good. They look like they're doing something, but they are not effective when it comes to companies that have the size, the revenue, the market power that Google has, because they have, first of all, lawyers to appeal the decisions, and second of all, they have revenue enough to sort of buffer these fines into their normal day-to-day operations as a cost of operations and kind of thing. So what would sort of sort the problem? It's not only regulation when it comes to fines, but also reviewing competition law in the sense that will address other types of problems such as antitrust, looking into companies that are acquiring startups to sort of prevent future competition, or acquiring startups that will give them access to even more data and augment their market power due to network effects and other externalities. So antitrust needs to adapt, and there's a large discussion taking place of how to adapt antitrust. So the fines are sort of the remedy that we have today, but certainly it does not solve the whole problem.
Thank you, Marilia. This will definitely be interesting to follow in the next period as well. We can expect more of those sort of pressures and fines, and the question of value is always a good one. Thank you, Marilia. With this, we close the global part of the updates, and the recording of this webinar will be available. But stay with us. What's following is a couple of the regional developments, particularly from the Middle East and North Africa region, from Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean region. There is quite some interesting updates on that side. So I leave you in the safe hands of my colleague Adriana, who is going to lead you through the regional updates. Adriana.
Thank you for the floor, Vlada, and thank you for the roundup of developments, and also thank you to Marilia and Stuart, of course. We are diving right into the regional perspectives. First off, we have Wanda Perez. Wanda will tell us what happened in her region, which is the Caribbean region.
Hello everyone, with Caribbean updates, this is Wanda Perez. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, ECCB, and the Barbados-based fintech company BIT has signed a contract to conduct a pilot in blockchain issues central bank digital currency, CBDC, within the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, ECCU. This ECCB CBDC pilot is the first of its kind and will involve a digital version of the Eastern Caribbean dollar denominated DXCD, which will be used for financial transactions, all using smart devices. The Dominican Republic approved the implementation plans for the National Cybersecurity Strategy. The strategy is based on 4 pillars, and for each of them, an action plan was elaborated. In the first place, the strengthening of the legal and institutional framework. The second is the protection of the national critical infrastructure and information technology of the state. The third pillar is to promote education on security issues. On the fourth pillar, the strategy aims to establish and consolidate national and international alliances, since protection at the level of cybersecurity is impossible without the global concern. Thank you very much.
Ready, Wanda? Thank you, Wanda. And now we are moving to Asia with developments from Sita Lakshmi. Sita, please go ahead.
Hi, greetings from Jakarta. I have 2 updates. First, from Thailand. Thailand had the first democratic elections in the last 5 years yesterday. Few weeks before the yesterday elections, Thailand passed a cybersecurity law approved by National Legislative Assembly. The law grants government broad powers to collect data on internet users in the country and monitor their behavior. It also gives authority to government to access citizens' online data if deemed necessary. Officials still need approval from the court to access users' data, except in the case of critical cyber threats. In this situation, government has the power to conduct real-time surveillance of all internet users. Officials are permitted to seize computers and search the network. This regulation received negative feedback from private sectors and civil society. A director of Digital Media Law Institute at Qasem Banit University said that the scope of law is so broad. The Ministry of Digital Economy and Society replied that they will make sure that it will not allow for violation of individual rights and arbitrary use of power. They said that the law will not be used to regulate social media or computers or devices belonging to people. Move to Singapore. Facebook is bringing its new digital literacy program to this region in Singapore first. They aim to train 1 million people in Asia Pacific to think critically and share thoughtfully online by 2020. We Think Digital, the name of this initiative, is an online education portal with interactive tutorials covering a number of topics such as privacy, safety, security, digital discourse, and knowing your digital footprint. Singapore is the first country in Asia Pacific before it's rolling over to big Facebook markets in this region like Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Taiwan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sita, for the updates. And now we're moving to Africa. Jacob Odame-Biden will be speaking about the updates from the African continent. Over to you, Jacob.
This is Jacob Odame-Biden from Ghana, and I bring you the regional updates for Africa for March 2019. I take you to Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, where they've seen a significant growth in mobile content in Swahili, according to the Mobile Economy Report 2019. The number of mobile apps in the language increased from around 5,000 in 2014 to almost 30,000 by 2017. This translates to mean that more people are able to access useful services on mobile because it is in a language that they can easily read and understand. Kenya alone saw 16% growth in mobile internet adoption from 2014 to 2017, with over 4 million new users. I take it to South Africa, where Microsoft has launched its second Policy and Innovation Center, and this time in the University of Pretoria in South Africa. The Policy and Innovation Centers are designed to bring together various stakeholders from government, academia, industry, and civil society to share best practices and experiences to encourage innovative policy dialogues and recommendations that can help better shape society. I finally take you to Rwanda, where, according to a report, Rwanda's plan of ensuring that schools in remote areas get access to reliable internet to promote effective teaching and learning has been given a boost by the launch of a satellite for the purpose through a collaboration with the UK-based company OneWeb. With this program, schools in very remote and sparse locations that cannot be connected with traditional fiber connection can have access to the internet through satellite. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. And last but not least, from Middle East and North African region, Hanan Boujemi. Please go ahead, Hanan.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Hanan Boujemi, and I will be bringing updates from the Middle East and North Africa for the IG briefing of DiploFoundation. The UN Regional Office, UNESCO, organized the second Arab High-Level Forum on the World Summit of Internet Society and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in Beirut from the 19th to the 21st of March 2019. The meeting took place at the UN House in Beirut, and it was in partnership with the ITU Office of the Arab Regional States, the Lebanese government, the telecom operator Algero, and the League of Arab States. The Division of ICT Policies is leading the work in this specific department and has included 6 tracks which highlights the priorities for the Arab states, mainly the digital developments in the Arab region, the ITU Regional Development Forum for Arab States. There was also thematic and community workshops which focus on issues that are very specific to the Arab region. There was a meeting of the Program Advisory Committee for the Arab IGF, another meeting for the Arab e-government directors, and finally an intergovernmental meeting on technology for development, which excludes all the other members, but includes the government officials and members of other intergovernmental institutions. The forum focused on discussing the linkages between information society and sustainable development, internet governance issues, and priorities for the Arab region. It also covered how digital economies and smart societies can accelerate the implementation of WSIS action lines, themes, and priority areas, and contribute to the achievement of SDGs in the Arab region. Another update concerns the position of the UAE in attracting investments in artificial intelligence and robotics. So Dubai has recently published a report stating that the UAE attracts over 21 billion in foreign capital in just 3 years in foreign direct investments for artificial intelligence and robotics, and it's said to be the highest in the world, and most of the investments came from the European Union and the United States, accounting for 5.7 billion and 3.9 billion respectively. That's all from me. Thank you very much and see you soon.
Thank you, Hanan, and thank you once again to all of our speakers who brought their regional perspectives to our briefing. I will be pasting the link in the chat where you can see on our observatory all of the developments that were mentioned by our speakers. And now I will give the floor back to Vlada for some final announcements and reminders. Vlada, over to you.
Thank you, Adriana, and particular thanks to Wanda, Sita, Jacob, and Hanane for sharing the updates from the regions. It's always good to have a bit of a reality check of comparing the global developments with what's actually happening on a regional level and what might be relevant to people on the ground. With this, we close the webinar briefing for this month. The briefing recording will be available on the website soon, the next days. The newsletter is generally available. The new editions will be available on Digital Watch or dig.watch/newsletter. And of course, we continue to follow all the developments regularly and report from as many events as we can. Thank you again for participating today, for sharing your thoughts and questions. Thank you, Marilia and Marco, for helping, and all the team for helping the realization of this webinar. And we'll see you the last Tuesday of next month, which is, I think, if I'm not wrong, April the 30th. Till then, see you online. Bye-bye.